What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Punching Up. I am your host, Maya May, and well, what a week it has been. We are all exhausted from having to discern between what is real and what is not real. And a lot of you might not know, but I used to teach creative writing at the University of Miami. And a lot of what's been happening in the last week has been an exercise in storytelling. I was telling my followers on Instagram that we have to approach everything that's happening right now as a story that's being told, because otherwise we might lose our absolute frickin' minds. And what's coming out of the White House is a story that isn't necessarily based in facts. And that's on everything from what's happening at the Charlie Kirk investigation to tariffs to grocery prices. Everything is fiction. And I think it's really important for us to start to talk about this as storytelling. And so my guest tonight is a person who I've been following their blog for a while. And I really like the way that they approach the understanding of what is narrative and what is controlled by the billionaire media, which is now, as we can see, starting to shrink down to just a few owners. And so the question tonight is, what are we to do and how do we tell a better story so that we can save our democracy? Because democracy is down at the half. That is me foreshadowing my guest tonight, who is the author of Fourth and Democracy, Evan Fields. Welcome to Punching Up.
Thank you so much, Maya. Thanks for having me. I'm grateful to be here, and I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm ready to get started on this.
Yeah, well, we have a lot to cover because the story that's being told right now is a dark one, and it's feeling like we're more divided than ever. You are an Army veteran, so you've seen that side of Americana. You're also have a master's in public policy, and you write Fourth and Democracy. Can you tell me a little bit about how you transitioned from being an Army vet and deciding that this is something that you wanted to do for work, for a living?
As a soldier, you go through a lot of things in the Army, and one of my big outlets became writing and, trying to get my feelings out that way. I was kind of a confused young man that wasn't really sure about therapy or dealing with my own feelings or anything yet. So that's kind of what I try to write about. And that's what I started writing about at the beginning. And I was trying to figure out, what I wanted to do when I got out of the Army. And I knew that was going to be public service. And when the Trump administration came around again, I knew that I wasn't going to serve that regime and I didn't want to be a part of that. So what I did was I started reaching out to people that I respected and voices that I respected that were like proponents of democracy and proponents for people like myself and, working class people getting their story out there. And one of those people was Rick Wilson. And I searched and scourged the internet and I finally found Rick's email. And I think I bugged him enough to where he was like, okay, this guy is serious. And so I kind of transitioned from using my strength that was sort of an outlet in writing and made that kind of, I guess, into a career, a direction that I was going to take myself. And I guess a lot of my writing goes towards young men like myself and how we can create a narrative to make them better people. And I try to do that through my writing. And that's what I'm excited to talk to you about today is, that narrative creation and how we can apply that to the media ahead of the midterms next year and how Democrats can use that to, reach young men and reach everybody as a matter of fact.
Well, and that's a place where we're obviously struggling right now. And I know they talk to a bunch of consultants, Democrats. How are we going to talk to the young men? And people made fun of it because it is laughable in the approach. Now, something stuck out to me when you mentioned that you were not necessarily wanting to go to therapy, but writing was like a way to work through your emotions. When you're writing and you're thinking about young men in this country right now, are you approaching it from almost like a therapeutic standpoint, or like what is your approach to try to resonate with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I try to take things from my daily life and the struggles that me and friends and fellow veterans go through. And I see a lot of young men that are lost without opportunity and kind of searching for direction and things like that. So I try to take the things that I've learned through therapy and through the growth that I've had and the vulnerability that I've tried to commit myself to, and try to express that to other young men and show them that it's okay, that we're going to be all right, and that there's strength through expressing these feelings and talking about issues. I think that's really important.
Well, and the issue of the last week, obviously, that's dominating the headlines is the Charlie Kirk assassination. And
Yeah.
for me, it revealed that we are far more fractured. The reality that a lot of people are living in is not the same reality that I'm living in, even more so than I previously thought.
Mm.
And you were one of the first to come right out and speak truth to the situation. And can you talk a little bit about why you decided right away to just jump on this as the media was starting to kind of whitewash his story?
I was so frustrated with it, honestly. And I was watching the immediate response online and on the news and everything. And I think one of the things that drove me to speak out is that we can say the right thing as men and as Democrats, and we can be forceful and not scared to tell the truth about things. And I think that goes into, at the same time, we can say that it's a horrible tragedy what happened to Charlie Kirk, and we can feel bad and show empathy for his wife and his daughters and things like that. But we also have to be truthful and recognize that the way that he lived wasn't necessarily, it wasn't good. He promoted division, he promoted hierarchy of men, he promoted the kind of culture that led to his downfall. And I think that we can't be embarrassed to say that, because it's the truth. And we have to address these things because what voters are looking for right now is somebody to be truthful. And I think that's what we're looking for from our elected leaders. And I think even myself, I grew a little bit frustrated with the immediate response, because we're immediately whitewashing a man's legacy that promoted white nationalism and things. And we can't
Mhm.
lie about that. We have to be direct, and we have to call it out, and we have to be truthful with people, about what exactly was going on and led to that.
Do you think it's because the truth is so damn frightening to people that this is the reality that we're living in?
Absolutely. And I think that part of it is you see good people that know the truth on corporate media and everything, but there's almost this hesitancy to say it. And because it is so ugly, and we've become almost desensitized to it over the last 10
Mhm.
years since Trump entered politics. And I think
Mhm.
that, I think that's a strength that Democrats can have. And I think somebody like Zoran Mamdani, and there's people like Graham Plattner, and of course, we see women leading the movement every day, like Jasmine Crockett, speaking truth to power and calling these things out. And I think that independent media does a really great job of that too.
Well, here's the thing is we can't actually resolve the issue or a problem if we don't name the truth of what the problem is. And so I wonder if there is almost too much of an incentive for people who aren't interested in solving the problem, because the problem itself is what benefits their continued career or just keeps them safe. And obviously, I think for young people, especially young men, they pick up on that and don't necessarily have the same pathways to explore what it is to be vulnerable and to come to the truth. And a lot of people are saying, oh, well, his debate style, it was debating this was, I think it's the Ezra Klein article, that he's doing politics the right way. I want to talk about debate, because I wasn't on the debate team, but I was on the speech team. And what Charlie Kirk does, it doesn't necessarily one look like debate to me. What does it look like to you?
It looks like a pre-planned performance, that Charlie Kirk had a topic and a direction that he wanted to get to, and he would manipulate his way into getting the answer that he was looking for. I don't think that that setting that he was promoting was the right position for a debate, because when we see classic debates, we see it in the setting like a general election, where it's candidates standing up there and there's a moderator, and there's a back and forth and a discussion of ideas. And while I think that Charlie Kirk he opened a forum for a discussion of ideas and allowed people to go against the things that he was pushing out there. I think that a more realistic scenario with debate, it is possible to get ideas out there, but that forum that the right wing is using, I don't think that that's real debate, especially things, I forget what it was, the Jubilee debates with
Oh, the
that Mehdi
surrounded.
Hasan was on. That whole culture is just kind of, it's a way for them to get their talking points out and promote culture wars rather than open form discussion, I think.
Yeah, for me, it looks like propaganda. And because I'm a word nerd, I was like, let me look up the etymology of debate. And if we really wanted to bring people together in healthy discussions that would actually promote consensus, we wouldn't use a form where the etymology of it, the root of debate, is to fight. And
Exactly.
so I ask myself, are we all just comfortably lying to ourselves as a society about what it will take to actually bring Americans together?
Yeah, and I think that we have to have some really difficult discussions, and I think that we need people that are willing to speak truth to power. And I think that, some of the people that I really admire right now that are doing it are candidates like James Tallarico, because he goes into these spaces and he talks to people that aren't necessarily sharing his same perspective or political beliefs or anything, but he's doing it in a way that he's showing that he's showing young Christian men that they can be good people and they can have empathy and they can care for their neighbors. And I think that doing things like that and going into those forums and showing them that there's another way to the life that they're living, I think that that's a big and effective way to get those points across to another audience as well.
But we're fighting against the algorithms. And James Tallarico is fighting against the algorithms. I know one of the clips I'm thinking of, and I see it because it shows up because of who I follow. And he's talking about the actual 1% that people need to be concerned about. It's not immigrants or undocumented immigrants or trans people, but it's the billionaires who divide us.
Mm-hmm.
But you're just writing recently, the billionaires more and more are taking the platforms and manipulating the platforms. So, can you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how we can possibly get around that? Because I don't know the answer.
It really is scary, isn't it? I think I just saw yesterday there was reporting that Larry Ellison's going to own up to 80% of TikTok in the US. And we've seen the things with his son and the Paramount deal and potential CBS deals and other people running the news department there. So it gets scary, especially when they infiltrate not only the corporate media, but they already have that stronghold on the tech media and everything. And I think a great example of what we saw in their ability to weaponize that against us is the unfortunate Charlie Kirk video that we saw. I believe that there is policy in place where terroristic videos and videos of violence and everything are supposed to be immediately flagged, and that gets reported across different social media apps to where
Mhm.
they get brought down on those apps as well. But we saw that didn't happen with the Charlie Kirk video. That was a violent death that was on our page all day continuously. We're still seeing clips come up of that. And I think that goes to show that it can be weaponized politically against us and to
Mhm.
suppress views and to make the narrative what the right wing and what Trump needs it to be. But I think that as Democrats, as independent voices, that can't shy us away from those spaces. We need to go on shows like this, shows like YouTube shows, independent media, things like that. We need to use storytelling to promote these points of view and get out into these places that might not necessarily be comfortable, but allow us to directly reach the voters in a way that I think they're frankly looking for.
Well, when I think about story, I think about the story of our own lives, what we're experiencing, which is real, and then the story of what we're watching, right? And so, in many ways, this is the White House reality show. We've just experienced the Charlie Kirk episode. They will weaponize and in any way, just even the fact that JD Vance went on Charlie Kirk's podcast and ran his podcast, hosted his podcast, just speaks to how much for them this is the rage entertainment, the rage-tainment of it all. And so if we look at it from that perspective of like, this is what I'm watching, but this is what I'm experiencing, I'm starting to think that what we might have to do is focus on the story of people's lives. And you talk about that a lot in the sense that you talk about what you experienced in your life. And so one thing that cannot people can't be lied to about is their finances. And we're seeing right now, I think they said people are Googling help with their mortgages. It's at its highest number since 2009.
Mhm.
Is that something that you think we can do online, or is that something that we're going to have those conversations in person?
I think it can be both. I think that we can have open forum discussions online. I think that that independent media provides an avenue for that. I think that regular people using their voice and making it known the things that they're going through, I think that's a big thing that needs to be done. I do think that I'm trying to think of how that's even possible. It's just the DNC and the machine and everything promoting regular people. I think that that's a big thing that we need to be looking at, and what regular people are going through, and meeting people in the places that they are. And I believe that a lot of young voters and the people that can be pulled off from, the right wing sort of back into that more central space to where they can be potential Democrat voters and everything. I think that reaching them online is a big priority, and it needs to be. I saw that the DNC was saying that they're mobilizing on college campuses and everything, and I think that that's a big move too. That the fight has kind of been on college campuses, so I see the in-person aspect really working there and getting in touch with voters that way. I think that would be really effective.
Well, and I think people are craving that in-person community, even post-pandemic. I think people have a hard time coming together in real time, in person, and just even talking to a stranger. And I wonder if it's now is the time to seize the moment, because maybe there will be backlash to, at least among the youth. I would think they're the ones who are suffering most of the gun violence, whether it be as witnesses, or just even the fear of being shot in school and having to go through lockdowns. And so, do you think this is an opportunity? I don't know when the DNC is planning on rolling out all of these college activities, but do you think that we have time to communicate what needs to be communicated between now and the midterms?
Yeah, I do, honestly. And I think that, we saw it with the Fight the Oligarchy tour. We saw the response to that. And I think that if Democrats use town halls and use public facing meetings and everything and meet people in their communities and hear those stories from them, I think that can be really effective. And it's a space that Republicans are shying away from. We see them running away from town halls like their pants are on fire. You know what I mean? They can't get out of there soon enough because those open forum discussions. And I think that goes into young people as well, because if you go and meet young people at college campuses and have these discussions with them in a setting like that, for people that already don't have third spaces to be able to communicate with each other, it gives them that sense of community, of being in the same room and having that open forum discussion. So yeah, I think that could be really effective for candidates. And I see people like Kat Abou-Ghazaleh out of Chicago. I think she's running in Chicago 9. She does a lot of that and holds a lot of in-person events to try and get the community involved. And I think there's candidates out there that are doing a really good job of just that.
So do you think it's actually just looks bad because we're perpetually online, but out there in the world, people aren't nearly as divided? I saw the video, Perfect Union posted a docuseries they did with Bernie Sanders, who traveling through West Virginia. And it's like, you watch it and it's like, oh, that's quaint. We're fine. But then you look online and it's like Civil War.
Uh-huh.
So,
I
and I
don't.
think that
I know what you mean. I don't think that necessarily being perpetually online is a bad thing, because we get kind of a taste for nationally what's going on, and locally you go out in your community. And I think that, it does take those kind of events to get people to come out these days. I think everybody's kind of wrapped up in their own world. And even, especially with the economy right now, people are struggling and everybody's at home and online and paying attention. But I think that everybody wants to be outside. We want a reason to have community and be talking to each other and having these discussions. And I think I'm cautiously hopeful that the Democrats, get out there in communities and get out there and talk to college students on campuses and everything. Because, if not now, when? When are we going to do it? Because if not, we're going to find ourselves getting ready for 2028 and saying the same thing. We need to get out into the community more and talk to people face to face and things like that. So I'm hopeful. I really think that we can do it. And I think the people are waiting for it and ready to, be a part of a new coalition and a new movement.
I think so. And I think one of the things that has been shocking to me over the last week is that I'm starting to see some Republicans say, perhaps we need to tone down the rhetoric. I think it's Don Bacon out of Nebraska was one of the people to speak up. So do you think, even if we're not necessarily seeing the results of it online yet, do you think there are conversations happening in middle America, working class America, where they're going, all right, this is reaching a tipping point that we don't want to see?
I do. I see it, I think, within my own family. My sister-in-law and her family lean a little bit more towards that side of like center right and everything. And even they were like horrified by what happened. And I think that it's a double-edged sword, because you see that horrible violence that sends some people into radicalization and they call for things like civil war. But there's a lot of human empathy that goes into it too, when you see that happen and when you see it happen to somebody that they support, and they, apply that thinking to other demographics. I think that it gives people a second to step back and kind of, reevaluate things and say that we do need to bring the temperature down. And that's kind of what I try to do with that piece on Charlie Kirk. And I think that we can recognize two things at once: is that, there were bad things, but this is a horrible act of violence, and we do need to calm down the rhetoric, and we do need to be better. And I think that this is a moment where we can definitely push that out there.
How do we stay consistent enough with that when we do have leadership that will sit in the Oval and gaslight people into oblivion, which is because that triggers the amygdala. Like, I find myself, I have to like do 10 deep breaths after watching Ted Cruz or JD Vance say something that I know is unequivocally false. And I myself know this, and I know all the techniques to calm myself down. And it is very difficult for me to not hop online and be like, blah, 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 blah.
Mhm.
So what is your recommendation for people? Because you seem very calm. You seem like a very calm individual. What is your recommendation for people who are looking to turn down the temperature in their own lives, in their own conversations with people, specifically right now?
That we're going to be okay. I really think that we are. I think that we don't want things to get to the point. I think what we witnessed as a whole, everybody as Americans last week with that shooting death in that video, I think we realized, despite the rhetoric from the administration and everything, despite what goes on online, I think we all just want to be okay. And I think that, I'm sorry, what was the original question again? I'm trying to think,
how can people specifically right now have those conversations in a way that is one, honors their truth, but also that helps move the conversation along? Because right now it's easy to be frustrated. It's easy to look at what Republicans are doing and say, hey, it doesn't matter what we do. it doesn't matter. They're so extreme that it's a lose-lose. We can't work with them. In the same way that they're out here saying we can't work with Democrats because they're all radical leftist lunatics and they're violent. We also, very rightfully so, I say it's quite difficult to work with Republicans because they've completely tossed every uh, moral out the window. And so, how do we get to a place where we can be the bigger people, but not be the doormat?
I think we need to be disciplined. We need to be disciplined in our messaging. We need to be disciplined in the things that we support as Democrats when we're reaching across the aisle. I got frustrated with Chuck Schumer with the spending resolution earlier this year. I think that capitulations like that, we need to stand firm in what we believe, but also express why those beliefs are right and everything. And I think that we're looking from Democratic leadership. And I think this spending bill coming up at the end of the month and the government shutdown possibly coming, I think that that's a stance that could show not only Republicans that we're not playing around going into those midterms and that we will make corrective action on these things. I think that it shows voters that the Democratic leadership isn't playing around as well. We need to be firm in our stances and what we believe in. We can't say, hey, we're doing this now because it's going to help us down the line. We need to do what we're supposed to do now. And I think that starts with the Democratic leadership in both Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries. I think that that's what we can look to with this spending bill and kind of see how things are going to go and what direction that they're going to take things. But yeah, being firm in our beliefs and being firm in the fact that we are going to do something to stand up right now. And also we have plans to be firm when we win the midterms in 2026.
So I like it when we win, and you have,
Yeah.
and I wanted to point that earlier is your use of precise language, saying regime instead of administration, because they're not administering anything. Can you talk about the power of language and how you're choosing your words and how people need to be more mindful of how they choose their words?
Yeah, it is important. And I think that, especially with their weaponized rhetoric, we saw it after the Charlie Kirk shooting. They said the radical left, their rhetoric, they was throwing out fascism and things like that. But that's exactly the kind of things that they're enacting right now. And I think calling it what it is important. And it is a regime. There's no administrative aspect to this. It's all one common goal of cruelty and just putting their boot on our neck and everything. And I think calling that out for what it is and not taking a step back from that and saying that, oh, we're sorry, we didn't mean fascism. We meant that you're acting like a fascist. Things like that. We have to be forceful with our words and not shy away from them because it's okay and language has meaning and the words that we say, have power. And I think that there's a lot of independent voices right now that are out there, especially on Substack and social media and things like that, that are using the right kind of language that we're looking for from our elected officials.
So we have the language online, as I'm not sure how old you are, but we're not likely in the gamer space. I'm not in the gamer space.
No, I'm a millennial, 37.
So a lot of this radicalization is happening in the gamer space. So if we're to reach these young men who uh, end up being, three clicks away from being radicalized, it seems, how do we reach, how do we reach them there? Do I need to learn how to play? I don't even know what the games are.
I I honestly think it's simple, and I probably need to be better about it, honestly, too, and figure out how to do some like live stream gaming and things like that, and get on spaces like Twitch. And I'm not sure all of the names of them that Gen Z's on. I'm gonna have to get with my nieces and figure out sort of what they're looking at. But I wrote about it. It had to have been like back in April when I was frustrated with Democrats' response to to all the executive orders that were coming out. And I said, why not meet these people? Why not meet these young kids in the spaces that they're on? I know that some of these congressmen and women play video games. We saw it happen when I believe it was AOC and Tim Waltz did it during the general election. They got on there and they were playing Madden and they were answering questions in the chat and things like that. I think that those are useful tools where somebody like a Hakeem Jeffries or a Cory Booker or people like that, they can get on there and they can just hang out. And I think that also goes to, you know, kind of the storytelling, because then you're getting to see like what these elected officials are doing in their downtime, and it makes them more personable and relatable to the younger generation. And they can see that like, oh, this isn't some guy that's eating babies in a pizza shop or something. You know what I mean? They can see like, this is just a regular guy like me that hangs out and plays PlayStation and hangs out with his dogs or whatever on his downtime. I think that, you know, meeting young people in those spaces is really important, and putting ourselves in spaces that aren't necessarily comfortable and that we're unfamiliar with. I think that we need to get better about that too.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the willingness to experiment is important, because as I'm hearing you say it, I'm like, that sounds horrifying to me to have to. I can't even figure out how to get on Discord. And I remember when Mastodon was a thing, and I spent hours trying to figure out how to get on Mastodon. But in order to, do what I would like to do, which is move the conversation forward, we have to actually be able to have the conversation. So, hey, everyone, I guess we're all learning how to be Twitch streamers.
Oh yeah. I'm going to hop on the PlayStation after this and we'll try to get it figured out, and I'll let you know.
Yeah, I think, what are we up to, like PlayStation 9 now? 10? Where are we at?
PlayStation 5 Pro, and there's rumors about a new one coming out before Grand Theft Auto 6 comes out, but they'll be like $1,500 by then. So I think we're going to be with the PlayStation 5 for a while.
Okay, well, see, and then that's the thing. It's like I remember the gamers were talking about tariffs because it was affecting their consoles. So I guess we have to branch out and do a little bit of digging into these other spaces. And I think I I don't speak for everybody, but I'm going to speak for myself when I say it's quite exhausting to have
It
to
is.
try to learn and exist in all of these different spaces. But it's also the work. It's the task at hand, it seems, because otherwise we will lose our democracy. And I don't think anybody wants that.
That's what I was going to say. It's the price we pay for democracy. Sometimes it's uncomfortable, but somebody's got to do the work. And I think we all need to step up and kind of get uncomfortable and have uncomfortable conversations. And, this isn't comfortable for me, that's for sure. But we got to put ourselves out there and put out what we feel and the best that we want for this country. And that means, getting into those spaces. And I think you're absolutely right about that.
I know at least one person listening is like, "Ooh, this means I get to buy a PlayStation and call it politics."
Yes. They finally get to convince their wife.
I feel like that's got to be happening at least in some living room somewhere.
I hope so.
Well, Evan, where can people find your Substack? What's your handle for it?
Yeah, you guys can find me on Substack at Evan Fields NFU. I run the News from Underground Substack, and I'm also on Lincoln Square. You can find Fourth and Democracy on there, and periodic articles and stuff. You can find me on Instagram at Evan Fields NFU. But yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on, and of course, you are welcome back anytime.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maya. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks, you too, Evan. Well, guys, apparently we're just going to have to stay busy saving democracy by exploring all sorts of new avenues like Twitch streaming. I know a lot of us learned new vocabulary this week, but there are also experts who have been researching all of these things like groypers for quite some time. I highly recommend you, if you remember Cynthia Miller Idris, I had interviewed her probably several months ago now, and she has a great book, Hate in the Homeland, that you should check out, that actually talks about all of this. And so we have all of the tools at our disposal, and I think that's the thing that's most frustrating to me, is when we have the tools and we're not yet using them and taking advantage of them and leveraging them, because I can tell you the people who want to destroy democracy are using every single tool at their disposal and then some. They're inventing tools, and it is maddening. And so we have to learn to use the tools at our disposal. And so that's why I wanted to talk about storytelling tonight. So I'm glad that Evan was here with us. But I want you to research storytelling. I kid you not. Yes, this is an actual homework assignment. I need you to research storytelling because there's elements, there's character, plot, setting, tone, conflict. And if you approach what's happening right now from a storytelling perspective, it's going to make it much easier to figure out how to tell a better story. And like I said earlier during the show, the story that I think is consistent across the board is that our families are struggling, and it is going to get worse. And that is a story that the facts are there. It cannot be denied. And so it's not like the manufactured reality that the Trump regime is forcing everybody to live through. So thank you for joining in on another Punching Up. We have plenty of shows on Lincoln Square right now that you guys can check out, new shows coming up. And so I'm excited about those. So stay tuned. Follow me at My On Stage on all the platforms. Make sure to hydrate, and I will see you next week.